Everyone. Welcome everyone to Comedy Noir, also known as American Dark Comedy in the Ollie roster. The fourth film series offered by Art Eckstein and Ollie. These films take traditional noir themes and social settings and turn them on their head to make them funny. But how can this be? We shall see. This class was created and will be presented by Art Eckstein, Professor of History, Distinguished Professor of History, and Distinguished University Professor Emeritus at the University of Maryland. Special thanks to you, Art, for this summer course, and I turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody, and welcome. It's good to see everybody again. So we'll follow the usual structure. People will see the film before class. I'll lecture on it for about 50 minutes. We'll have a short break, and then we'll have 35 minutes or so for questions and discussion. And you all have available a terms and concepts memo to help you follow along in lecture and discussion. And there's also, I guess there's a chat for if people are uncomfortable asking questions live, they can write down questions and I'll look at them at chat. I've got 34 people already. So this is a course on comedy, and the first question to ask is, what is comedy? Comedy is a Greek word. It means merrymaking or carnival, and the idea of presenting hour-long, one-theme, funny skits on stage comes from the ancient Greeks. These skits may have started out as the equivalent of medieval-type Punch and Judy shows, but they developed into full-scale, sophisticated, funny plays. Aristotle defined comedy and theater as a cleansing of our emotions, not through terror or through pity, as happens with tragedy, but through laughter. The center of comedy writing in ancient Greece was democratic Athens because of the tradition of freedom of speech developed there in connection with self-governing democracy. By the 420s BC, the Athenians even had an annual comedy festival where comic plays by various authors appeared in competition on stage, with a first prize winner being chosen by selected judges. But whether the judges had judged correctly was itself judged by a vote in the People's Assembly the next day. It was a democracy. The narrative structure of Athenian tragedy is clear. Things start out with a serious problem, say a plague is ravaging King Oedipus's Thebes, and then things just get much worse. Oedipus discovers via the questioning of witnesses that the cause of the plague is actually himself, that he's the killer of his father and is living in incest with his mother. Whatever else is going on, and I should say Freud took his high school Greek exam on this play, whatever else is going on, this was Sophocles inventing the police procedural right out of his own mind, out of thin air. King Oedipus is the ancestor of the questioning detectives on TV shows like NYPD Blue or Law and Order. But the structure of comedy was the opposite of this. Things start out with a very serious problem or threat, but the threat is resolved. There's a happy ending, and everyone goes to the seashore. The first comedies in theaters of democratic Athens were political satires in the vein of Saturday Night Live. In fact, our words theater, democracy, comedy, political, and satire are all ancient Greek words. These comedies dealt humorously with current events, or they lampooned specific current politicians by name to keep them from getting swelled heads. So, for instance, a famous general was depicted on the Athenian comic stage as a compulsive masturbator. I don't think you could even do that on Saturday Night Live. Or during a long Athenian war with Sparta, Aristophanes produced the anti-war comedy Lysistrata, where the women of Athens, disgusted by the stupid war being waged by their men, stage a sex strike in order to bring the war to an end. That was in the 420s. In the 380s, the Athenian comedians then invented the other kind of comedy we still use today, comedies of everyday life, sitcoms. Can a clever but good-hearted man get rich by cheating a greedy pimp? Can two lovers, separated by strict parents or separated by fate, find a way to get together? Answer, yes, it's a comedy. So the films in our course, though, are special. American Dark Comedy is a follow-up to the course we did last spring on California Noir. So the 4 films we'll be seeing are all comedy noirs. That is, they take traditional dark film noir themes and settings, violent gangsters in the first 2 films, middle-class desperation in the 3rd film, Sunset Boulevard type Hollywood failure in the 4th film, and turn them on their head to make them funny. And they are funny, despite tremendous murderous violence in all of them. How can such threatening situations, so firmly rooted in the film noir tradition, be made funny? Well, we're going to see. But the structure of comedy, going back all the way to the Athenians, the structure of it gives us a clue on how this was made funny. So today's film is Some Like It Hot from 1959. It's a world-famous comedy starring Marilyn Monroe, Tony Curtis, and Jack Lemmon. Curtis had established himself as a dramatic actor in Sweet Smell of Success, 1957, a film I really recommend people see. Some Like It Hot, 2 years later, established him also as an actor of farce, which is actually where his career then went. The other male lead, Jack Lemmon, was also a famous comic actor already, winning an Academy Award for Mr. Roberts in 1955. And then, of course, there was Marilyn, one of the greatest comic actors of all time. But yes, it's a comedy, but it's also film noir. The plot of Some Like It Hot is set off when the 2 male protagonists, 2 itinerant musicians, accidentally witness a mobland crime, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, where 7 men were lined up against a wall and gunned down to death. Our heroes, that was a real thing that happened. Our heroes are then pursued by the killers to wipe them out because they're witnesses. The accidental witnessing of a crime with dangerous consequences for the accidental witness is itself a film noir trope. There are lots of famous examples. One is Witness to Murder, 1954, with Barbara Stanwyck from Double Indemnity, but this time she's innocent. Or Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window, 1954, with James Stewart. It's also important in film noir that the protagonist is trapped by his own unruly impulses, as in Double Indemnity or Vertigo, or by fate, or by the system, Chinatown. There's no escape. This naturally made anxiety a basic characteristic of noir films. A Double Indemnity, for instance, what if Walter and Phyllis are found out? That's true in Some Like It Hot, too. Will the murderous gangsters catch up with the heroes? Will our heroes be discovered to be men and thrown out of the all-girl band where they're hiding? But unlike in Double Indemnity, or Vertigo, or Chinatown, in Some Like It Hot, the 2 heroes escape the trap. That's why it's a comedy. All the noir anxieties are put to rest. Film noir 2, we know, bitterly asserts the futility of the wish come true, the absurdity of wishing will make it so. Walter Neff ends up dead. So does Joe Gillis in Sunset Boulevard. Jake Gittes in Chinatown is helpless before the power of the evil oligarch Noah Cross. But Some Like It Hot has gifts for its audience, the opposite outcome. Not only do our heroes escape the murderous thugs who are hunting them down to kill them, but our heroes also escape loneliness and poverty. Tony Curtis gets the girl of his dreams, the charming Marilyn Monroe, and Jack Lemmon gets what he's always wanted, marriage to a nice, very rich man. Our comedy was made by Billy Wilder, the director of both the very dark Double Indemnity and the very dark Sunset Boulevard. And Wilder chose to film Some Like It Hot in black and white rather than color, and the first Chicago scenes are classic dark film noir cinematography over and over and over. It also actually has a much higher body count than either Double Indemnity or Sunset Boulevard. It begins and ends with bloody mob massacres. but it's a parody, another Greek word. It takes elements of film noir and turns them comic. So it's the director's job to take the words on a page of script and bring them to life with live actors. Very difficult job. In Some Like It Hot, Billy Wilder was both the screenwriter and the director. The film is doubly his creation. So I want to talk a little bit about Billy Wilder. We've talked about him before in the previous class, but that was early Wilder. By the late 50s, Wilder had established himself as a master director in many different genres. He was happy. He was happy in Hollywood. Starting out as a penniless Jewish refugee from Europe with very little English, he was an astonishing success story. His pictures made a fortune. He had 6 Oscars of his own, some for screenwriters, some for directing. All in all, more Academy Awards than even John Ford. He'd rescued his friend, the great noir novelist Raymond Chandler, from obscurity. He had a good marriage. He presided over a superb art collection. He lived to be 95. We should all be that lucky. But even in Wilder's noirs, especially in Sunset Boulevard, there'd always been a layer of dark comedy. So even though Billy Wilder was a Jewish refugee from the Nazis, and most of his family, including his mother, were killed in the Holocaust, Wilder even made a comic film about hunting Nazis in the ruins of post-war Berlin. It's called A Foreign Affair, 1948. And he followed that comic film with a partly comic film set in a World War II Nazi prison of war camp, Stalag 17. 1953. Then in the mid-50s, Wilder suddenly turned out 2 of the greatest pure romantic comedies ever made. Sabrina, 1954, with Audrey Hepburn and Bill Holden and Humphrey Bogart, and The 7-Year Itch, 1955, with Marilyn Monroe. So what audience got from Wilder with our film in 1959 was a summing up of his career, a multi-genre stew. Some Like It Hot was named the funniest movie of all time in a 2000 poll conducted by the American Film Institute, the AFI. But Some Like It Hot is also a gangster film, a noir film, and a screwball comedy, all in one. We have a gritty crime-related plot, the sweaty desperation for money and safety, a femme fatale, shadowy black and white cinematography, a violent climax with multiple deaths, but funny. The dramatic device of deception, central to film noir, is central here. Masquerade is a plot device repeated from Wilder's Double Indemnity, Walter Neff masquerading as Mr. Dietrichson on the train. And it's copied from the Nazis hiding as ordinary people in A Foreign Affair, masquerading as ordinary people. Tony Curtis's character, Joe the saxophonist, is a double deceiver. He's masquerading as a female Josephine, but at the same time also as the male millionaire Shell Oil Jr. Curtis is out to seduce Marilyn Monroe at any cost. He's a ruthless thief. He bullies a child. He lies to her about being very rich. He traps her into sex by lying to her about being impotent. It's not very attractive. In fact, the character of Joe is not much different from Curtis's soulless, constantly maneuvering Sidney Falco in Sweet Smell of Success 2 years before. But that was a tragedy. That Joe falls in love with sugar is what makes this a comedy, when he actually falls in love with somebody. Meanwhile, Joe's partner, Jack Lemmon, masquerading as Daphne, is ruthlessly focused on gaining wealth and security by marrying a millionaire, even at the cost of gender fluidity. Wilder says that Jerry's main trait is not his growing androgyny, that's actually there from the very beginning, but it's his desperation, which is also there from the very beginning. And that means that Some Like It Hot reflects a sense of the jeopardy of life, which is central to film noir, It's just that in the movie, all that jeopardy is finally overcome. And it also reflects another central film noir element, the disappearance of all psychological bearings or guideposts. The film accomplishes the disappearance of all psychological bearings the moment Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon appear in women's dresses and high heels, sashaying down the train platform. A disorienting spectacle if there ever was one, especially for an audience in 1959. I can't imagine what the reaction was. And Tony Curtis says that Wilder carefully set up the scene for shock value. He set it up so that suddenly you see they're women. A side note on parody. Tony Curtis's character, Joe, his full name in the script is Joe Marlowe. That's a nod to Wilder's friend Raymond Chandler's famous private eye, Philip Marlowe. It's an inside joke from Wilder. Some Like It Hot begins on the glistening, cold, rain-slicked streets of nighttime Chicago, a classic noir setting. After a speakeasy bust, Prohibition is still in force in 1929. A hearse is shown bearing a coffin, but the police approach, sirens blaring, and the funeral procession quickly morphs into a running gun battle. These early scenes in Chicago are just like Walter Neff careening in his car through the nighttime streets of Los Angeles at the start of Double Indemnity, his life oozing from his body. In this case, though, most of the oozing is done by the coffin, which is packed with bottles of bootleg liquor, some of which have been shattered by police bullets. It's a violent, high-action chase scene filled with gunfire, pure film noir. But it's done in comic spirit because the gangsters elude the police. There's no tragic end gunfight between the police and the gangsters. The opening credits are topped by the name of Marilyn Monroe. Then at the height of her fame, she was coming off a string of hits that included her great turn in Wilder's The 7-Year Itch. By this time, Monroe was associated mostly with sexy roles in romantic comedies. But it's important to know that she actually had a background in film noir, with appearances in such films as the classic Asphalt Jungle, 1950, as a disturbed childminder in Don't Bother to Knock, 1952, and especially as a ruthless, adulterous killer in Niagara, 1953, which was also the first film where she got star billing. So she was perfect for the two-sided Some Like It Hot. The character she plays in Some Like It Hot is in part like sweet characters she'd recently been playing, but only in part, because Sugar Cane in Some Like It Hot also has a darker side. Like Joe and like Jerry, Sugar Cane's a fake, employing a fake identity. Born Sugar Kowalczyk, she's dropped her Polish surname and masquerades now as an Anglo in order to pursue her singing career. She has no friends. She has a terrible drinking problem, so incapacitating that she might get fired from the band. When the boys first encounter her, she's alone in the women's toilet, swigging gulps of bourbon. At that point in the film, she's also depicted as much a ruthless gold digger as Jack Lemmon is. She's totally focused on solving all her problems by finding a millionaire husband to exploit. The ruthless gold digging of Sugar and Jerry, that is Jack Lemmon, was part of Billy Wilder's cynical view of the power of social class in America and above all the pressure of money. That was true of both Double Indemnity and Sunset Boulevard, which we saw, and it was also even more true of Wilder's next film, the Oscar-winning The Apartment from 1960. Sugar says that she despises being on this crummy train with this crummy girls band, but she has no choice. The men in male bands always exploited her, not only sexually, but financially. She says she's, quote, tired of getting the fuzzy end of the lollipop. That's why she wants to marry a millionaire. She says all this while furiously stabbing at a block of ice with an ice pick. Later, she has no scruples about lying when she finds a millionaire Mark on the beach, claiming that she herself is a rich debutante. Fake name, fake status, fake everything. Uh, George Axelrod, who wrote The 7-Year Itch for her, and later The Manchurian Candidate, too, says that Marilyn, underneath, was a very sad person. Marilyn, in fact, complained to Tony Curtis about Sugar's character as written, saying Sugar needed to be shown as much less ruthless and more capable of love. Marilyn, with her patented combination of naivete, vulnerability, and sexual energy, was perhaps the only actress who could prevent Sugar, as the role is written in the script, from seeming cynical and, in fact, unlikable. She battled with Wilder over this. She was right. And in the end, Sugar really does have a heart of gold and settles for the love of another penniless saxophone player. That's what makes it a comedy. Just like Tony Curtis's Joe, who starts out very cynical and ruthless and then falls in love. So Marilyn starts out very ruthless and embittered, and then she falls in love. And that's what makes it a comedy. Among the elements that define the classic film, but the starting out is totally dark film noir stuff. Among the elements that define the classic film noir too, perhaps no element is more central than the anxiety that radiates from the noir screen. We've already talked a little about this, but one aspect of noir anxiety is male sexual anxiety. Just consider the image of Phyllis Dietrichson in Double Indemnity with that cute anklet, or the unattainable Madeleine Elster in Vertigo. So the heroes of Some Like It Hot are continually confronted with a range of terrible anxieties. They're on the lam from the mob. That'll kill them. They're so frightened that they disguise themselves as women. But their escape strategy, in turn, engenders more anxiety. Can they pass for women? How much, as 1920s male, or for that matter, as 1950s males, do they really want to pass for women? What would that mean? The specter of gender fluidity is, of course, ever present in the film. It's the basic idea. One of them, Jerry, Jack Lemmon, enjoys being a woman so much that he ends up engaged to a very nice, very rich man. The other male character, Joe, Tony Curtis, is less comfortable being a woman and keeps returning to being a man. But then as a male, he's confronted by the mythic sexual power of the goddess Marilyn. Can he survive having sex with her? The continual safety anxieties and gender anxieties are certainly played for laughs, but they're nervous, anxious laughs. In Some Like It Hot, the Chicago mob is so murderous that transvestitism becomes a matter of life and death. This cross-dressing is at the heart of the film's comedy, of course. And I have to say, it totally violated the restrictions that had long been imposed on American filmmaking by the Motion Picture Production Code, the Hays Office, that existed since the early 1930s, to censor morals in Hollywood film. But such was the clout of Billy Wilder and Marilyn Monroe that the film was distributed by United Artists without code approval. That's the first major Hollywood film to be released without code approval since 1935, almost 25 years before. But despite the absence of code approval, Some Like It Hot also turned out to be a tremendous commercial success and a tremendous critical success. Commercially, on a $3 million production cost, it ultimately grossed $49 million. And whatever her late 1950s image as the original dumb blonde, something that was imposed on her, Marilyn Monroe was actually shrewd at business. She negotiated that in addition to her salary, which was big, $300,000, her contract mandated she gets 10% of the gross after the film's profits passed $4 million, which they did in the first 2 weeks. The gross profits on the film, that is, after $4 million, was $45 million, of which she got 10%. So the commercial success of Some Like It Hot made her 10 times the money as her big salary. In modern terms, it was about $46 million. And if you say, well, she simply had good financial advisors, the answer is that she was shrewd enough to choose the right financial advisors and shrewd enough to take their advice. Not every movie star did. Marilyn Monroe could make such a huge financial deal because she was the greatest female movie star in the world. And her presence virtually guaranteed that Some Like It Hot would be a hit. She understood that a film star fulfills several functions, and one of them is to be a commodity that the film producer sells to the studio and to the audience. And she demanded a high price for being a commodity. Well, Wilder was certainly very happy when she asked for the role of Sugar. They'd worked together well enough on the great comedy The 7-Year Itch in 1955. And once Marilyn was on board, Wilder greatly beefed up the part of Sugar. He changed the part of Sugar to make room for Marilyn's stardom. And that changed the focus of the movie away from the two guys and much more onto Sugar. Wilder commented, "She was tough to work with, but once you saw it on the screen, it was just amazing. Amazing, the radiation that came out." Radiation. It's an interesting 1950s terminology. But the end result wasn't just a huge financial success, though it was that. It was also a huge artistic success and was recognized as such by the film industry. Some Like It Hot went on to win 6 Academy Award nominations, including Best Actor for Lemon, Best Director for Wilder, and Best Adapted Screenplay for Wilder. And amazingly, amid all these awards, Marilyn Monroe's performance was ignored by the Academy. Amazing to think. But on the other hand, she won the Golden Globe Award as Best Actress of 1959. That's comedy and drama. The financial success and industrial awards for Some Like It Hot constituted a huge blow against the motion picture production code. If the film had done nothing else, it would be historically important for that reason alone. And 40 years later, it was among the first films included in the AFI's film preservation program. But of course, it's much more than a blow against the motion picture production code. Now I want to turn and talk about the production and it's legendary, the difficulties that there were. Some Like It Hot fulfilled Tom Hanks's warning that time pressures, money pressures, and personality clashes between very creative people could make almost every movie a struggle. And that was certainly true with Some Like It Hot. The movie was made during the summer and autumn of 1958. Principal photography took 3 months, early August through mid-November, mostly at MGM Studios in Hollywood, but also at the Hotel del Coronado in San Diego, a real 1920s hotel. And it was relatively close to Hollywood. So it substituted for Florida for the Seminole Ritz. Billy Wilder was a director also who shot films sparingly. As they said, he edited in the camera. So post-production film editing took only 3 weeks. That's, by comparison, Easy Rider took a year and was finished by December of 58 and premiered in early 59. The film's financier was the Mirisch Company. It was still new to Hollywood at this point. The financing from the Mirisch brothers was generous because Some Like It Hot was to be the launching platform for their new company. So no, they didn't spare expense. And the Mirisch brothers also gave Wilder something he had never really had before, complete artistic freedom. So Some Like It Hot is the result of when a director is given complete artistic freedom. And as a result, Wilder went on to make 8 more films for the Mirisch Company. But the film's difficulties during principal photography have become legendary. Marilyn Monroe was consistently very late to the set, nervous, demanding dozens of retakes, did not remember her lines, did not act as directed. The line where she walks into a room while Curtis and Lemon are in drag and says, "It's me, sugar," took many takes because she couldn't get the 3 words in the correct word order. Another simple scene where she's searching for a bourbon bottle in a drawer while saying, "Where's that bourbon?" took 53 takes. But don't let these stories fool you about Marilyn as an actress. 3 full days had been scheduled for shooting the scene of Shell Oil Jr. and Sugar's initial meeting on the beach because Marilyn had many lines and they were complicated lines. But in fact, this entire scene was finished in 1 take in only 20 minutes. So what's going on here? And I'm going to tell you. Billy Wilder himself was difficult on the set. He was a notorious screamer. He especially forbade departures from a script, and he especially forbade departures from a script that he himself had written, and he'd written this script. He said he liked Jack Lemmon as an actor because, quote, he wasn't argumentative. Well, Marilyn Monroe was. Many of the problems stemmed from Monroe and Wilder disagreeing on how she should play the role. She accused him of sexism for disputing her interpretation of Sugar. She angered him by seeking to alter many of her best scenes. And it's been suggested that she deliberately ruined several scenes in order to get them to be done her way, a direct contest of wills with Wilder. And really, does it matter if the spoken line was, "Where's that bottle?" instead of "Where's that bourbon?" This is Wilder's fault. And in this struggle of wills, who was right? Jack Lemmon had this to say. We'd be doing a scene and she would just stop, just like that. We hated it. We really hated it. But eventually we saw that she had a built-in barometer of how things should be played and how things were playing if they were being played wrong. If it didn't feel right, she couldn't make herself continue. And I got to tell you, she was always right. We'd see the results in the daily rushes. It was magic. Cary Grant, the famous star, had the same habit of suddenly stopping completely if he didn't think the scene was played correctly. But he didn't become a legend for it. William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy both, they did the same thing on the original Star Trek TV series, just stopping if it didn't seem right for their characters. They didn't become legends either. Again, something else is going on here. Tony Curtis was another difficult person on the set. He has rarely, in his memoirs, he has rarely a kind word for anyone. He too found Marilyn's behavior irritating and complained about having to wait for her for hours in makeup, wig, and painful high-heeled shoes while she sulked in her van. But they were long-term friends. going back to a sweet affair 10 years earlier when they were both just young beginners. He always had a soft spot for her, and in his book on the making of the film, it's well worth reading, he vehemently defends her. In fact, to the end of his life, he defended her. He stresses her brilliance as a comic actress, her problems with alcoholism, and above all, that during the filming, she was going through a difficult pregnancy. In fact, she miscarried a month after filming ended. Curtis also claims that she went to bed with him the night before the filming of their big romantic scene on the yacht, not only because they were old friends, but for the sake of emotional realism in performance the next day. Her line with him was always just relax. He thought it was courageous that she did that. So, despite the real difficulties Marilyn caused on the set, her co stars, her fellow actors, loved her and defended her. Above all, they defended her vehemently. That's true of both Lemon and Curtis. I've talked about this before we started. Lemon is a general nice guy. It's not surprising that he would defend her. But Curtis is a real SOB. And if he defended her, it's because she really got to him as someone worth defending. On the other hand, Billy Wilder, he was bitter about all of this. She took loads of barbiturates to make her sleep, which resulted in her being many hours late on the set. She actually overdosed on a combination of alcohol and barbiturates during shooting and had to spend a week in the hospital, and they had to shoot around her. She was psychologically fragile and filled with fear over losing the baby, which is what happened. It wasn't until more than a month into shooting that Wilder even learned that she was pregnant. Learning this from her husband, the great playwright Arthur Miller, who was infuriated at Wilder's treatment of her. Don't you know she's pregnant? No. Nobody told me. Meanwhile, dealing with Monroe ended up driving Wilder to bed with heart palpitations and painful back spasms. Wilder vowed never to make another film with her again. Quote, I've discussed this with my doctor and my psychiatrist, and they tell me I'm too old and too rich to go through this again. Later, he declared, I think there are more books on Marilyn than there are on World War II. And you know, there's a great similarity. But you know, a lot of this is mere irritation at the time and public bluster. Rumor has it that Wilder wanted her to star for him again in his new comedy film, Irma la Douce, paired again with Jack Lemmon. But she was dead by August 1962 from an overdose of barbiturates. So I want to now talk for a bit about gender as we're coming to the end. From the start, Joe, the Tony Curtis character, understands that if he and Jerry do not put on dresses and transform themselves into women, they will be slaughtered by the mob. But the cross-dressing motif does a great deal more than simply produce a ridiculous situation for laughs. Some Like It Hot contains what we might call a progressive critique of misogyny and of binary gender identity. Joe and Jerry remain biological men. That's part of the joke in the movie. But gender refers not to biology, but to cultural practices and identity. That's part of the joke in the movie, too. Gender represents cultural expectations, cultural representations. So, in principle, there's no limit to how many genders there could be, because gender is fundamentally a subjective concept for every individual to decide on their own. I'm dressed below my professor outfit here. I'm dressed like a cowboy with boots. Jerry remains a biological man, but he becomes gender fluid. When we first meet Joe and Jerry, their attitude towards binary gender division is typical of men of their time, whether it's 1929 or 1959. For example, as they first go on board the train to Florida, they spot Marilyn Monroe's sugar cane walking in front of them, and they ogle her swaying behind. Jerry exclaiming, "It's like Jello on springs." Even the train agrees, emitting a spray of steam as Sugar walks by. And audiences are perfectly well aware that Sugar Kane is being played by Marilyn Monroe, the epitome of late 1950s binary American female sexual charisma. Meanwhile, the comedy is enhanced by the irony of the fact that the men ogling Marilyn are themselves dressed as women. Being dressed as women, of course, exposes them to the same sexist objectification that they are accustomed to directing at women. Noting the way in which men seem to be regarding Daphne as a sexual object, Jerry Daphne complains to Josephine, "I'm not even pretty." Josephine responds, "They don't care just as long as you're wearing skirts." Uh, it isn't clear how thoroughly the two men learned their lesson, but it's a case that the experience of Daphne and Josephine go a long way towards at least teaching Jerry and Joe what it feels like to be a woman. How can they wear these shoes? How can they balance? Uh, Daphne, in particular, enjoys her new role. We've talked about that, a fact that will be crucial to the film's famous ending. But when they arrive at their hotel in Miami, they become very much aware that thanks to their disguises, they've become the object of the male gaze. Daphne even receives a butt pinch from an aging millionaire who clearly believes that the combination of his gender and his wealth authorizes him to do this. Josephine responds, "Now you know how the other half lives." I think for a 1959 male audience, beyond the nervous laughter, that would have been illuminating. And then there's Marilyn herself. Yes, she was promoted and merchandised as a sex object, but her image is actually complex. It combined an ideal of female purity, naivete, emotional vulnerability, that little girl voice, endlessly forgiving, endlessly compliant. Combine that with a radioactive female sexuality. In Some Like It Hot, she's the center of every aching male gaze. For instance, when in that famous ultra revealing sequin dress, she sings, "I Want to Be Loved by You." It's even been suggested that Jack Lemmon's bubbly femininity as Daphne is actually an imitation of Monroe's persona as Sugar. That is, as they were filming and Lemmon saw what Monroe was doing, he began to imitate her in his own character. Meanwhile, Tony Curtis's accent as Shell Oil Jr. is a conscious imitation of Cary Grant. That would have been a delightful joke to audiences in 1959 when Cary Grant was still a major Hollywood star. Maybe it's lost on people now. But if Lemmon's Daphne was imitating Marilyn's giggly screen persona, that wasn't the real Marilyn. That was just her persona. By 1959, the real Marilyn was a more serious person. She was increasingly comfortable as a New York City bohemian. She studied at the avant-garde Actors Studio, and Lee Strasberg said she could have played Chekhov. She converted to Judaism in 1956, and not because Arthur Miller was Jewish. Even after they divorced in 1961, she identified herself as, quote, a Jewish atheist, and there was a menorah in her home. In The Prince and the Showgirl, 1957, she outacted Laurence Olivier. That's another very interesting movie to see if you want to see what Marilyn could do. She was actually a voracious reader who loved traditional literature. At her death, her library contained over 400 books. She took extensive handwritten notes for each and every one of her scenes in our film. She didn't just go there and extemporaneous. She thought about each scene and wrote notes to herself about how it should be played. Joe DiMaggio, the great baseball star, who was her first husband, sent half a dozen roses to her grave 3 times a week after she died for the next 20 years. He blamed himself, his controlling personality, for the breakup of their marriage. And he said she saved his life by getting him into therapy. I think that's the real Marilyn. Uh, okay, so I want to now come into the final moments. The famous final line in the movie, Joey Brown's "Well, Nobody's Perfect" is famous. At the film's premiere in Hollywood in 1959, a witness recalled Joey Brown's nonchalant delivery of that famous final line elicited the loudest, deepest, heartiest laughter I have ever heard in a theater. 1,000 spectators roared in unified delight. Uh, Actually, if you watch that scene, it doesn't appear out of nowhere. There's a buildup to it where Jack Lemmon is saying, we can't get married. He says, why not? He says, well, I'm not really a blonde. No, that's okay. I can't have children. No, we'll adapt. We'll adopt. That is a whole sequence of barriers that Joey Brown gets rid of before the final, I'm a man. So that's brilliant acting, actually. But consistent with the noir inflections in Some Like It Hot, the ending, while it looks primarily happy, is actually left a bit open. The purity of Sugar's love seems to have pulled Joe momentarily away from his habitual exploitation of women. But who knows how long that will last? He's just another saxophone player like all the other saxophone players she's been hooked up with. Tony Curtis's saxophone trickster Joe is such an untrustworthy character that Sugar might still end up abandoned again. And he warns her that that might happen. And her answer is, stop trying to convince me. As for Daphne and Jerry and millionaire Osgood, what really is their future after the film ends? Is Osgood looking forward to a life with Daphne, i.e. not with Jerry? Or is Osgood's final declaration really openly gay and he's looking forward to a homosexual marriage with Jerry? Wasn't a homosexual subtext there in the film from the very beginning, not merely with Osgood and Daphne, but with Joe and Jerry? Wilder himself was asked to contemplate what happens after the movie ends, and his answer was, I don't know. Billy Wilder died in 2002 at age 95. His tombstone reads, Billy Wilder, I'm a writer, but then nobody's perfect. Well, he put that on his own tombstone. Okay, so let's take a break and then we'll come back for questions. One of the things when thinking about this in the broader social context is that it is amazing to me that Marilyn Monroe was not even nominated as Best Actress for the Academy Awards for that role. While Jack Lemmon was for his role. And really, of the two guys masquerading as women, he's the least convincing. So it's it's a shocking kind of thing to think about. But okay, I'm ready for questions. So you raise your hand. Joan, except it isn't Joan. Yeah. Hi, good to see you.
You're muted. Unmute.
Okay, nice to see you again. I my personal taste made the slapstickiness of the banter between Curtis and Lemon very painful.
Yeah.
Very painful. And I was shocked that in 2000, a group of people did say this film was the comedy of all time.
Best American.
I did enjoy Marilyn's performance immensely. And I want to say that your lectures, I could endure a great deal of pain watching a movie if I got to watch you lecture after the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Here, here.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the film is almost 70 years old. So,
We're older than that,
yeah. But I think Marilyn's performance is actually at the center of any good feelings about the film. And what is amazing to me is that wasn't recognized at the time.
Mhm.
And that Wilder was recognized both as director and as writer, while her interpretation of the character, which she bitterly fought with him about, was the correct one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just amazing to me.
A couple of chats for you, Art.
Okay, the chat. So Meg is saying we must remember that it was a film of its era with the chauvinism and sexism of the time. I think it's not only no Oscar; she wasn't even nominated for an Oscar. She wasn't one of the 5 or 6 people who would have been nominated. I think in terms of the chauvinism, I was trying to say, yeah, sure, of course, that's what we're going to expect. But nevertheless, if you look at it from a different angle, they are enduring the objectification as women that women were getting, and they're appalled by it, outraged by it. And I think that was a step forward, especially for 1959, to hear guys saying, oh, wow, now we know how the other half lives. Richard.
Do we know to what extent Marilyn felt snubbed by not getting an award or any acknowledgement of her acting skill?
Yeah, she was unhappy. But it was compensated by the fact that she won the Golden Globe as the best actress in comedy or drama of 1959. So look at the division about that. So I think that was compensated a little bit for it. Somebody said, why do we think that Marilyn was not nominated? I think that by that time she'd been pigeonholed as just a dumb blonde, and she was just doing a dumb blonde performance. So people said, we've seen this before. It's just a reiteration of the 7-Year Itch. Except I mean, I don't think it is, because there are these dark elements in Sugarcane's character, especially at the beginning. And she's transformed by love just like Tony Curtis is transformed by love. And that's why it's a comedy. But you have to start from the fact that they're bitter and cynical people, both of them. But people didn't see it at the time. We can see it now. Just as people thought that Lemon and Curtis were hilarious. Well, now it's, as Richard said, it's painful to watch. Michael Schulman, accepted.
Hey, Art, thanks.
Hi.
Hey, I have a question about the gender implications and the homosexual references, and maybe I'm overthinking it, but this was a 1959 film made about an era of 1929. Do you think Wilder was making any kind of implication or statement about what life was like in the US in the 20s, or was he just reflecting what he thought might be funny in 1959?
I'd say about the homosexual stuff, we didn't cover all of it. I mean, Sweet Sue is a lesbian, the conductor of the orchestra, and her a attendant is a wimpy little guy. And so I think the relationship between Jerry and Joe is also homoerotic, if not homosexual, but homoerotic. In some ways, this is a product, you could say, well, it's a product not of the United States in 1920s, but of Weimar Berlin in 1920s, when there was a lot of cross-gender stuff going on, which the Nazis were infuriated about. I think he was just inspired to do it because he was given free rein by the Mirisch brothers. They said, "You're the great artist, do what you want," as opposed to saying at Paramount, "You're an employee, do what we want." So is it it's certainly it's a commentary on 1959 objectification of women. It's making the males in the audience, however crude the characterizations are, making the males in the audience sit through what it would be like to be objectified that way. So I think that that's going on too.
That's interesting. That's interesting, though. That also speaks to another bit of comedy, is that it can be painful.
Yes,
And he was imposing that on them.
he was imposing that on them. He was, and I think Kathleen Moran would say comedy often starts out with a painful situation, but he imposed that all the way through it, right to the end, and that's why I was amazed. It was that he didn't just say it was a happy ending. He says, I can't imagine what would happen with these people. But his suspicion was that the Tony Curtis character was not reformed. That was maybe his cynicism, or he's momentarily reformed, but will soon stray, and she'll be left with the sock on the floor and the tube of toothpaste. So I think that in the ending, if you think of it that way, still has a hint of noir in it, but he's certainly making the men in the audience sit through what that was. And I'm trying to imagine what my father, who was a Marine veteran of Iwo Jima, would have thought sitting through that movie. Jim.
I'm aligned with what both Richard and earlier today Vicky had to say about the slapstick stuff. I'm not a big fan, but I found myself chuckling through the entire thing.
Yeah.
I was sitting there going, why am I chuckling so much? But I was, and it was very it was lovely to watch, actually, for me.
Yeah. Somebody is asking, how do we know that Sweet Sue is a lesbian? It's because she is coming on really forceful, and in 1959, that character would have been very disturbing again to males in the audience. Yeah, especially given that her sidekick is this wimpy little guy who she doesn't have boss around. She's sadistic. So, and she's riding herd on the girls, and I think so. I think that was as close as you could come in 59 to suggesting what's going on. And then someone said, this is Megan, I don't interpret Lemon's character as fluid from the get-go. Even in the end, though the movie closes with his being resigned to marriage, his relationship with Joey Brown is left in question as a funny ending. Yeah, I mean, he says he's a man. On the other hand, there he is, and Lemon himself says he enjoyed dancing with Joey Brown with the rose between his teeth. He could do it in interviews. He can imitate that. In interviews, he could also imitate Tony Curtis's version of Cary Grant instantaneously. I mean, they're just actors who can do these kinds of things. Um, how fluid was Jerry Daphne? Um, I think pretty fluid. Certainly shockingly fluid for a male audience in 1959. It's one thing to see guys dressed up as women, that's bad enough. But to see one of them actually enjoying it, he says, "Oh, I'm getting married." He tells Joe, "Oh, I'm getting married," and Joe says, "Oh, who's the lucky girl?" He says, "Me." So, Jim, what are you doing?
Trying to participate. I chuckled at that. I mean, I just laughed out loud when you said that because it's hilarious.
Yeah. Why is it hilarious? One can ask, why is it hilarious?
Because I don't know. It's unexpected. I mean, it wasn't what I thought. I don't know. He said it and it surprised me. And I go, well, what a perfect thing to say. Yeah, great, great. Yeah, it's me.
I'm sure it got a roar. It got a roar in the audience
Oh,
all
yeah, sure.
the time. But the unexpected is you don't expect a guy to say that.
No.
So that's the gender fluidity that's involved in that. Richard. Can't hear you.
You'll have to unmute, Richard.
During the last scene with Joey Brown, it seemed like there was an emotional commitment to being the woman in a relationship that he was trying to argue his way out of, rather than just saying, I quit, I'm not going to do this. It seemed like he had committed himself to being a partner to Joey Brown and was trying to persuade his way out of that commitment.
Yeah. And Joey Brown won't be persuaded. And especially if you think at the very beginning when he's introduced, he's really quite a sexually explorative person because his previous wife had been something who was able to smoke cigarettes holding them between her toes. And he's actually at the beginning, he's a foot fetishist also. So I think it's the case that Jerry is trying to argue. That's very good. He's trying to argue himself out of the relationship, and of course behind them, the Tony Curtis is trying to argue Marilyn out of the relationship also, and they both fail because true love triumphs.
It's a few chats for you, I think, Art.
Oh, let's see. Yeah, Michael Schulman says, I think Art's interpretation here is correct. Of course it is. That in 1959, you could only get away with modest implications towards gender fluidity. How different than the world we live in now. I think that's right to think about how revolutionary this film actually was, how shocking it was, and what a risk Wilder was running and the Mirisch brothers were running, and this being their first launch of their new company, to take an adventurous film like this. And again, it doesn't seem adventurous to us now. It's old hat, but it wasn't old hat then. And I do think with Sweet Sue, they went as far as they could. And even 10 years later, in the film that Maggie Smith did, they had to be very careful with what they were doing. So they couldn't push it too far. But I guess I'm saying it's amazing how far they pushed it, given the culture. And then, okay, Meg says, Daphne constantly commented on delighting in being in the pastry shop, and oh boy, I want some of that, etc. He was a great ogler and seemed desirous of the pulchritude all around him on the train, and struggled to restrain himself so as not to reveal his true identity. Yeah, that's the joke in the great scene where Marilyn climbs into bed with him in the train in the upstairs bunk. How does he how can he control himself in that situation? And again, it's interesting. It's Daphne. It's not Tony Curtis. And she would have made a mistake getting into bed with Tony Curtis at that point. And but there are also these kind of things. Says I can't. I'm not even pretty. Well, why are they ogling me? He says I don't know. Your legs are terrible. You know that they're able to do these kinds. That would have been a shocking line also for males sitting in the audience. I think this is an indication of Wilder being able to express what he felt in Berlin in the 20s, the stuff that was going on culturally in Berlin in the 20s, and being able to do it now. I wouldn't say without restraint, but pretty freely to be able to do it. It's true they're ogling at the beginning, and the other thing that happens with Daphne is she stops ogling. She's ogling Joey Brown. So it goes away, and that's the fluidity that's involved in it. Okay.
Raise your hand up. You can see.
Yeah, he can see it.
I couldn't see it. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Can I talk?
Oh,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah.
It's interesting to me how you're talking about the perception of an audience today in 2026 for a film that's almost 70 years old. And I noticed that what bothered me the most was those giggling blonde women on that train. I just thought I'd go nuts. I really almost had to stop watching the film at that point. So I thought, gee, that's me carrying my sensibility as a woman today back 70 years. Well, first of all, we got married 2 years after this film came out. So I've got that perspective. But my favorite film, one of my favorite films of all time, is a 1957 film, Wild Strawberries by Ingmar Bergman. And I think, I don't know, it may be that I used to run a film course in Ollie, and I mean personally, and it seems like to me that maybe all those foreign films that I saw made a difference in how I perceive this film today.
Yeah.
But it got better for me as the film went along. I think the last third of it felt a lot better. Did you feel that way?
Well, it was dominated by Marilyn, the last part.
Maybe she got her way a little bit more. Anyway, it was just interesting for me to see the gap of all those years and then say, wait a minute, there's a film that came out 2 years before that I still to this day really like. So who knows?
I think there might be something. The early part of the film is dominated by Lemon and Curtis, but the last third is totally dominated by Marilyn. And that's the greatest part of the film.
Okay. That's probably a large part of it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I would like to butt in here and say that today, in 2026, I am very comfortable with the name Joan on our little box here when I'm Lou and I'm male, and I don't feel uncomfortable about being with female. Now, if you go back to when my mother was born in 1911, she was named John Henry because they
On
wanted
your birth certificate, John Henry.
on Yeah, because they wanted a boy, and there was a rigidity there that really impacted her for her first 12 years. Then that she marched up the steps of the Frederick Courthouse at age 12 and changed her name to Yvonne. Yes. But
Yeah.
things have changed over time tremendously.
Well, I mean, I think the movie. I mean, I was surprised that they said it was the funniest movie ever made. Also, I can think of other movies that are funnier, but um, I think we also look at it past the 1960s divide, and that we don't see it as revolutionary as it was at the time, because we're looking at it when we've already had uh, the revolution, which of course Trump's trying to get rid of.
That's right. That's right.
That's right. So I think the idea of men being comfortable as women and stopping to ogle women. I mean, even Tony Curtis stops ogling all the girls. He's only focused on Marilyn. That ogling goes away, and they drop the joke. It's no longer a joke. They're not interested. Wilder isn't interested in that joke. Um, Mark.
So I was interested in the opening scenes,
Yeah.
which we watched it last night and saw, and it said, "Oh boy, this is so noir, right?" I mean, like running but it wasn't just noir. Even in those scenes, it was funny.
Yeah.
The way they, treated it, the way that it was handled, the whole thing was um, almost farcical. It was like, I'll break the window, I'll shoot the guy, they're gonna shoot me, I'm gonna squeal out, I bumped into this car, I spin around, and then I go into the gate, and they say, and they're mimicking the roles that they're playing, like you brought the it's like they're being respectful to the dead in a it was, I thought, it
Well,
set the tone, and the whole thing was noir, but it was poking fun at noir.
yeah, Mozzarella's funeral parlors.
Right.
Um, but when you consider that Wilder is one of the great architects of serious noir, how can you explain that he suddenly does what you say he does? It's completely noir. Visually, it's
Yeah.
completely
Right.
noir.
Absolutely.
But then as I said, he flips it around. I mean, even the characters, the characters in the speakeasy, all of that stuff. The mobsters, how they look, spats, all of that stuff. But it's done by someone who was doing it from the inside, who had created the genre, in
Hmm. Hmm.
a large way.
Art, quite a lot of chats building up for you.
Okay, let me see. Oh, what are Meg wants to know what the noir elements are. They're being, okay. They witness a terrible crime. They're being pursued by the mobsters who are going to kill them. Um, they are filled with anxiety and desperation because they're poor and itinerant. They're willing to sacrifice gender not only for safety, but in Jerry's case, to marry a millionaire if they can, which is the kind of a double indemnity greed. And again, Marilyn's character, as written, would have fallen right into that. That's what she objected to, and of course, the last third of the movie is her triumph over Billy Wilder and his giving in to the way she wanted to play it. So in all those ways, the cinematography is that way. Of course, it's classic noir cinematography. The atmosphere of anxiety, of desperation, of they're trapped. What makes it a comedy is they escape the trap. They aren't killed, and they end up with the people of their dreams, and even escape poverty. That's what
But
makes.
there's more to that. Isn't it that they, in the midst of the noiriest parts of the film,
Yeah,
they are putting a comic twist on it. And
yeah,
it alters the thing. Also, I think that the guys he has chosen, the actors he has chosen to be in the hearse,
yeah,
are hilarious.
yeah.
And whatever. Okay.
Well, another example of this, Mark, is they've escaped from the speakeasy, and it's snowing and cold, and they don't know where to go, and they're bickering.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. If you looked at it just visually without the sound, it looks one way.
Right.
Yeah.
Vicky has her hand up, I believe, Art.
Who had
Vicky
Vicky?
Wolf, I think, has her hand up.
Yeah.
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 Oh, there you go. Okay.
Well,
Sorry, I'm agreeing with Mark. That first thing that struck me about this movie, which, as I mentioned earlier, before we really started, was difficult for me to watch because I hate slapstick. Other
sure.
people are roaring in the aisles, and I'm the lone person who's irritated completely. But that whole thing with the setup, when they after the fight, you see some sort of liquid coming out of the casket, and it's not red. So you understand that it's illegal booze.
Yeah.
When they pull up to the mortuary, and Mozzarella's, that's also another comic touch.
Yeah.
They, without anybody watching them, the audience already knows now that there's no body in there. But all of a sudden, funereal music is playing, and
Right.
these guys are
Yeah.
very sadly taking it out there, being completely comedic about carrying the casket full of booze in, and pretending that it's still a funeral. So that kind of, the audience already knows, but we're still playing the role. To me, added to the comic aspect, even to the beginnings.
Yeah,
Right.
and I think that's right, Vicky, and also the choosing of George Raft to be Spats. Raft was a famous 1930s gangster actor, and the character he's playing is comedic because he's really stupid. He's vicious, but he's really stupid also. So there are a lot of inside jokes going on, I guess, in part also. Jim, but I agree. The slapstick stuff, I mean, that's the culture out of which Billy Wilder came, I think.
Agreed.
Yeah. Jim. Oh, wait. Susan.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm coming in out of the fog there. I don't know how to fix that. But I have a question. How many people saw it in the original black and white, and how many saw it in color? Because if you saw it in black and white, you weren't sure right away that that was not blood.
Yeah.
So there were quite a few things that would be very different if you. I saw it in black and white, and I thought it was great that way.
I think to put it in color would be an abomination. I know it's been done. There are colorized versions of it, but that's not what Billy Wilder intended. I mean, he intended it to be a noir, to look noir. Even in Florida, there's a lot of noir touches that way. Bonita? Oh, you're just saying yes. Okay.
Yes, I was agreeing with you.
Yeah. It's just horrible to think of them colorizing it.
It is absolutely awful.
Yeah. But of course, it's been done. So, I think Jim, you had your hand up again, also.
Well, I was just going to comment. We're witnessing an actual historical scene in the massacre.
Yes.
And it's horrific. We all know what it is, and it's horrific to watch. And yet, as Mark said, there seemed to be a little lighthearted touch added to that in their escape and all of that. And I thought it went together pretty well.
Yeah, the escape with the bullet holes and the bull fiddle.
Yes.
Yes,
Oh my God.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, they're machine gunned and machine gunned and machine gunned. They should all be dead, but there's one guy who's reaching for the phone, and that's what. Uh, but you know, it's coming from somebody who was one of the great architects of this entire movement. And at the same time, the kind of bitter, cynical view of American society as driven by money is the same in this film as it is in Double Indemnity. And they're all being driven by money. Sweet Sue is being driven by money.
Mm-hmm.
They, they all are. So, and this is something, especially in The Apartment, which he did the next year, where he's even much, which isn't a comedy, really. It's just terribly bitter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
There's still quite a few chats, Art. I don't know, maybe you've caught up with all of them, but there's quite a few out there. I
say
think
that again.
there's quite a few chats. It looks like maybe you've addressed most of them.
Let's see. I think George Raft was an amazing actor, a diminutive man who conveyed huge menace, power, gravitas. Yeah, this is one of the virtues of gangster films, that you can have small people who Al Pacino, The Godfather, and Godfather 2 is another example. Well, he had to be brought out of retirement by Billy Wilder to do this, and he thought it was amusing to do it. Let's see. I thought the slapstick. This is Meg again. I thought the slapstick was fairly subtle, especially compared to, for example, the Three Stooges. Okay, that's true. I can't watch them. I particularly like when the desperate boys sequentially open a series of office doors asking, anything for us, slam, anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But you know what? Again, that would reflect the desperation of people who are out of jobs.
Right.
It's funny, and yet it isn't so funny, and certainly not funny for them.
Especially now.
Especially now. I think that's right. So what's great about the film is that Wilder is just able to merge all of these things together. This isn't his most bitter film, actually, but it has plenty of social critique about desperation for money in it.
Yep.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So I was going to say something else about Maryland. Oh, yes. When you think about Maryland, there's something else. If you look at Joe DiMaggio and you look at Arthur Miller, DiMaggio was physically below his head, certainly a hunk, but he's a stupendously ugly guy. And Arthur Miller isn't much better. So when you think about who she chose to be her husband, looks did not come into it when she made those choices. And she was certainly right. I mean, it's unfortunate that DiMaggio was controlling, and he learned his lesson not to do it from her. Michael.
Hey, Art, yeah, we're at the top of the hour. I just have a question about next week's film. So we're going to watch Pulp Fiction, which I suspect most of us are somewhat familiar with.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations as I go to rewatch it of things to kind of look for and consider ahead of your terms and conditions?
Oh, okay. One thing to think about is that people have said that on the one hand, the relationship in the gang that's hit by Ving Rhames is a kind of creation of an interracial paradise. But at the same time, in the scenes where Tarantino himself is playing Jimmy, when they have to clean up the mess, he uses the N-word a lot. And that's a white guy speaking to a white and black killer couple. And Ving Rhames uses the N-word of white people who are his underlings. also. But he doesn't mean it the way white people mean it. So part of what's going on is Tarantino dealing with race as something to look at, and both how he would like it to be, and then he was attacked for those scenes where he's playing Jimmy and he's using the N-word. And Samuel L. Jackson told him, you have to tone it down. And one of the ways they toned it down was by giving Jimmy a black wife, Bonnie, the Bonnie problem. So, and you have to remember this film was made in the year after the Rodney King riots. So that's also going on.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that's great context. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, Art. One last question from somebody? All right. Thank you. See you
Okay.
next week.
Thank you for a great
so much.
couple hours, Art.
Bye.